Hey, I'm Dr. Kevin Skinner. I'm excited to share with you some of the things that I've found that works for successful couples. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you today is the importance of a disclosure process. So I'm going to jump right into that process. And what I want to share with you is really based upon what the researchers have been telling us what works with couples as they go through the healing process. So today I'm going to be focusing on why disclosures matter. And I'm going to talk about what a disclosure is, what the research is teaching us about disclosures, and then I'm going to talk about how to prepare for a disclosure mentally, and then the healing process after a disclosure, and then I'm going to talk about a three-step approach to creating the foundation for success. Now, all of this is information that is supplemental to my book, Rebuilding Your Relationship After Sexual Betrayal. And in this part in particular, I just want to give couples kind of a flow of what they can expect in a disclosure. I won't be going through the specific steps of a disclosure or what we refer to as an impact letter. The reason why is I think that that needs to be done with a professional because it's really requires time and effort. Today, I'm going to give you the overview of it. But before I do that, I want to talk about what I refer to as 7 things to look for after betrayal as a couple. And I want to outline this because many times when couples come to me, they are wondering what can we expect? What is kind of the process of healing? And so, first of all, things that we want to look for after betrayal. One is the stoppage of behavior. Is your partner working to stop the behavior? Are you wanting to stop your behavior? Because it's hard to rebuild your relationship when your partner is still acting out. So, working to stop a behavior, that's something that we're looking for. Number two is self-awareness. And this is for both partners. Successful people look inside of themselves, which helps them improve their self-awareness. And as your level of awareness goes up, how did I get here? Then really begin to accelerate your own healing because you start to understand what you've been doing, why you've been doing what you've been doing. It's a concept I call orienting in my book, Rebuild Your Relationship After Sexual Betrayal. The next part of it is addressing pain. When couples heal, betrayed partners feel heard and understood, and their pain is addressed and it's just not ignored. And then the betraying partner also addresses their pains. And what I refer to as their pains is maybe the history of what got them involved in their sexual behaviors. So there's a history there as well. So addressing the pain is a part of the process. Number four is doing a disclosure, and that's really what I'm going to be focusing on today is that disclosure process. So when couples discuss the details of the betrayal, they're more likely to stay together and improve their odds of healing. So we're going to be talking about the disclosure. I'm going to be talking about the research that supports that today. The next part is humility, and this is something that I have found consistently in the work that I'm doing. There is a humbleness, a willingness to learn, a willingness to say, I need help. And as a therapist doing therapy over the past 28 years, one of the things I found is that as individuals are a little bit more humble, they're like, I want to learn, I want to grow, I need help. I see really a stronger propensity for healing. Next is the development of empathy and compassion. I have personally found that this is one of the key parts of the recovery and the healing process. So, as individuals increase in empathy and their compassion for their partner, they improve in their understanding of each other. And so, in my book, I talk about that. I have a whole chapter on empathy and compassion because I think that that is essential for the healing process in couples healing. The next part is creating a recovery plan. And is your partner working to stop their behavior? Because it's hard to rebuild your relationship when your partner is still acting out. And so, as individuals get this recovery plan, there's a plan in place. It actually helps build confidence in the relationship moving forward. So, that's a core step that we're looking for. The next part is what I refer to as adding, what I'm going to say, add to this list. Now, I've added 7 things, but take a few minutes, and I would invite you at this time to kind of think about your relationship and what are some of the things that you think you need in the healing process and in the recovery process to move forward in the relationship? And then I encourage you to brainstorm things that you can do to aid in the healing process. So, what can I do to help solve some of these issues? I encourage you to work on that list as you think about what are some of the things I need. Maybe you need more time together. Maybe you need more accountability. Maybe you need your partner to accept your boundaries and really work to honor them. Again, what are the things that you need to look for in your healing? And this is for both partners. What do we need if we're going to help this relationship grow? All right, so one of the things, if you want to improve your chance of succeeding to rebuild your relationship after sexual betrayal, so the researchers have discovered some key indicators that successful couples implement after discovering sexual betrayal. So if you want to rebuild your relationship, I encourage you to apply the ideas that I'm going to outline here as we go through it. Some of these findings are based upon the research of Dr. Peggy Vaughn, the late Dr. Peggy Vaughn. She did research with 1,000 betrayed partners and looked at what they were doing that helped them stay together. So I find this slide very interesting. It really is, was the counselor helpful? And of 1,083 individuals who were betrayed, 57% said no, it was mostly frustrating. And 23% said yes, but not as much as I would like. And 20% said yes, very helpful. So really only 1 in 5 indicated that it was actually helpful. So again, as a therapist, I step back and say, why is that? What was it about this relationship, therapist relationship, that made it so it wasn't helpful? So I'm curious about that. And then I started looking at a little bit deeper, and it says, did the counselor focus directly on the issue of affairs? And 59% said no, they mainly focused on marital problems. And so they weren't actually focusing on the affair itself. 28% yes, but not as strongly or clearly as I would like. And then 13% yes, very directly. So only about a little over 10%, 13% said that it was directly dealt with. So one of the things I've stepped back as a counselor and said, why are we not focusing on the affair and the betrayal? Because if we do, I think we're more likely to get better outcomes and you're going to have a better experience in therapy. So one of the things I would suggest to you is if you're going to go to therapy and get help, make sure that you talk with a professional therapist who has been trained in dealing with affairs and infidelity, because if you don't, you might get into a situation where you are not even talking about the affair, you're talking about other marital issues. And I think that plays out in this next slide where Peggy Vaughn found that how many counselors did you see? And you see that more 3 or more was almost half of the individuals, 47% of the individuals saw more than one counselor. So that's a pretty big deal. So I'm going to encourage you as you seek professional help to get support of somebody who specializes in treating sexual betrayal, infidelity, and affairs. I think you'll get more of a focus on that, and I think that that will be better for the outcome for your relationship. Now, I want to now turn our attention to why disclosures matter. So there are times where I talk with individuals and they say, well, why do we need to go back and do a disclosure? What is the purpose of it? And so I believe, and this is many individuals who've looked at the research, I want to base what I do on research, what works, what doesn't, and why. And the foundation for healing is actually built upon trust and honesty. So for me, trust and honesty is the foundation if you're going to heal your relationship. So the betrayed partner, they learn the truth, and the betraying partner no longer carries the burden of their secrets. So part of a disclosure is actually, I don't have to carry the burden anymore. I'm finally honest. And I've talked with many individuals who've acted out, and they feel freer when they finally aren't keeping these secrets. And the betrayed partner actually has the information because often they have felt something is wrong, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. So a disclosure actually takes that to the forefront and allows the openness to begin in the relationship so healing can occur. Now, so what is a disclosure? Perhaps you're asking that question. So a disclosure after sexual betrayal refers to the process of revealing or disclosing information about infidelity, sexual misconduct, or betrayal within a relationship or partnership. It typically occurs when one partner confesses or reveals an act of betrayal, such as having an affair or engaging in sexual activities outside of the agreed upon boundaries of the relationship. So, in addition, a disclosure is a process, it's often marked by intense emotions. This is kind of what you can expect, vulnerability, and a desire for honesty and transparency. It involves the betrayer sharing the details of betrayal, including the extent of their actions, the people involved, and any relevant information. And then the betrayed partner, on the other hand, listens to and processes this information, which again, it can be very emotionally challenging and it may trigger feelings of shock, of anger, sadness, and betrayal, which is why, as a therapist, we typically recommend that it's done in a professional setting where both partners have support. Now, this is something that's very important. I've heard of many people who have botched up their disclosure because they tried doing it on their own, or they did it with somebody who didn't have experience. and they actually ended up having a bad experience. So one of the core things we suggest is that before a disclosure, you both have your therapist, a therapist who will be your support during that process. Now, this may take a little bit more time and effort, but when it's done properly, having personal support can help you know which questions to ask, which ones to avoid. If you are the betraying partner, knowing which information you need to provide, doing a full sexual history, and doing a thorough evaluation, which I will talk about in a minute. And then if you're the betrayed, to make sure that you aren't alone going into an environment, being shocked by the information and not feeling like you have support. So the purpose of a disclosure after sexual betrayal is really to facilitate open communication, initiate the healing process. And I think this is really important. It's really the starting point of the couple's healing process, because you can't heal without information. And then to rebuild the trust in the relationship, because then it starts to rebuild it because there's honesty and transparency. So it provides an opportunity for the betrayer to take responsibility for their actions, express remorse, which is an important part of the healing process, and then answer any questions or concerns the betrayed partner may have. It also allows the betrayed partner to gain more complete understanding of what occurred and enabling them to make an informed decision about the future of the relationship. So finally, it is important to note that the disclosure process can be complex and emotionally charged. So I encourage you to seek assistance of a trained therapist or counselor who's experienced in working with couples dealing with infidelity. This can be very beneficial. Doing it right, getting the right support, can help you set the tone for the rest of the healing process. I have seen individuals come to our office sometimes months and even years after doing a botched disclosure or trying to do it on their own, when they could have saved a lot of time. They're still in the relationship. They could have saved a lot of time and pain and fighting and arguing if they could have got proper support before as they waited so long. It was much more painful and years of it. So it can be beneficial to have the professional support of people who are trained to get you through this process. If you are interested, I invite you to find a certified sex addiction therapist, and you can find that therapist at sexhelp.com in your area. I am a certified sex addiction therapist. I've been trained. I actually train other therapists, but I have found that this organization, ITAP, is one of the best I've found at helping people and couples through the disclosure process. Something interesting that I just want to share. This is just a side note, and this is, how did you find out about your partner's affair? And it's interesting here that many find out on their own. So 53% found out about their partner's affairs on their own. This is what I call the shock factor. And someone else told them 14%, and about a third were actually told by their spouse or partner. Now, the reason why I bring this up is that means that at least half of you listening to this had the shock factor. And when we're in that kind of a shock, we typically experience post-traumatic stress related to reliving the experience, nightmares, flashbacks. We begin to avoid people and places. We begin to think about, maybe the world's not safe. Who is safe? I don't know who to trust. And then the next part of this is the mind is more anxious than it's ever been. These are some of the most common symptoms that people experience after sexual betrayal. So when you have the shock factor and you're experiencing those PTSD symptoms, many times you feel like you're all alone. And my hope is that you don't have to feel like you're alone, that you feel supported, and that you know that there are people who will understand you. So if your chances for rebuilding trust, they really depend on three things. Being willing to answer your questions, and this is really, as the betrayed partner, being willing to answer your questions. That's what you're going to need from your partner. Hanging in while you deal with understandable emotions. And this is something that's really important, is if you're the betraying partner, you're going to need to be able to hang in there while your partner tries to make sense of this car accident that you were driving, and they're trying to make sense of what happened. And so can you hang in there while your partner goes through this? And then number three, Dr. Vaughn says, demonstrating a commitment to the relationship by severing contact with the other person and stopping the other undesirable sexual behaviors. Now, there's more to this, but these are things that Peggy Vaughn found. These are three things that help increase the chance of couples staying together. Now, I think there's more to that. And the reason why I think there's more to that is because it's, what are we talking about? And this finding was really important. Dr. Vaughn, she said a couple is more likely to stay married when the spouse answers questions. Now, I think this is quite significant. When a partner refused to answer the questions, 59% were still married. So 59%, even when they refused to talk about what happened, were still married. It's almost 6 out of 10. But of those who answered all their questions, 86% stayed married. Now, you can share too much information, and I don't recommend that you get into the nitty-gritty details of what happened. But if you had an affair over a 6-month period of time, then you acknowledge, I had an affair over a 6-month period of time. This is where we met. But there are certain details of that affair, the sexual details, the terms of endearment, whatever it may be too much information. Keep it at a higher level, what I call the 5,000 or 10,000 foot view, rather than being on the nitty-gritty ground, because I think that's information that can be too much information. But still, answering your partner's question will increase the probability of your relationship staying together. So here are some things that you can do to prepare if you are the betraying partner, the person who's had the affair. One is self-reflection. Number two is gather your sexual history and do a complete sexual inventory. Go clear back in time. Number two is avoid blaming your partner. And this is a very common one. A phrase we typically use is gaslighting. So you want to avoid blaming your partner. Then you're going to write a letter to your partner talking about what you did, your sexual behaviors. You also invite your spouse to write down their questions, and ideally, your spouse would then give your therapist the questions, and you and your therapist would prepare the answer to those questions. And then, as you get support, included support, do you have a therapist, a religious leader, a friend who's going to be support and help you as you talk about these difficult things? And then we want to make sure that your spouse has support. So there's some things that you can do to prepare. I've seen people botch this up because their spouse didn't have support and they went in with their therapist, and the therapist, they just plowed on through it. And the betrayed partner was so shocked. They were like, whoa, and they felt ganged up on by the therapist and their spouse as they just read through it. So make sure that you have support, that there's communication, and that it's well done. Now, how to prepare if you're the betrayed partner. Again, the concept of self-reflection. Look at your pain, look at what you're experiencing. Be honest with yourself. Try to understand what your emotions are. Anger. Try to understand the nightmares and the flashbacks. Those are things that you want to do with a professional therapist. Again, I have found that many individuals are experiencing PTSD. So this self-reflection is, how has the betrayal influenced me? Get that kind of information. Next, prepare questions, get guidance. Can too many details hurt me? Yes, they can. So prepare your questions, but you don't want to get too much information. And then ask for emotional support. It's really important to make sure that you have emotional support, having a personal therapist, a friend or family member, so you don't feel like you're flying solo. Take a time out in a disclosure. If you need to, take a break. And so if you're in a disclosure and you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed, take a short break. Then afterwards, have a plan. You and your partner might drive separate cars. You might have different sleeping arrangements for a period of time so you can process and make sense of what you've experienced. And then what you would do, based upon the training that we've had, is you would then do an impact letter. And an impact letter is a time for you to reflect on what this information has done to you, how that betrayal has influenced you, not just now, but throughout the relationship. And then you're going to write an impact letter that, you can be guided by a certified sex addiction therapist in how to write that. But really, the core concepts are in there: how it's influenced you, how it's not fair, and really acknowledging the pain and the hurts that you have experienced. And then you would read that to your partner. And then finally is maintain support and make sure that you have connection as you go through this experience. So those are some of the steps for the betraying and the betrayed partner. And here's what the researchers have found. This is the part that I think is really important, that it can be overlooked. And this is what the researchers have found. According to Dr. Corley and Schneider, most partners and addicts, or people acting out, over 90% in their study, 90% report that they are glad that the disclosure happened. 90%. I'll take my odds on that almost any day. So we do a disclosure. If it's done well, 90% report that they're glad that they did it. Now, one of the questions we have to ask is, well, why is it effective? And I talk about this in my book. there's a critical part called the Zeigarnik effect. And Bluma Zeigarnik, just a quick story. Bluma Zeigarnik, she was in Europe watching waiters and waitresses fill orders, going to the tables, going back to get the food, back and forth they went. They never wrote down an order, but they filled them flawlessly without error. Now that's surprising, but that's what they did. Then what is interesting is the Bluma Zeigarnik, she invited them to come over and she asked about the orders. And what she found is that if they had completed the order, in other words, it had been filled, then the waiter or waitress had completely forgot that order. And so the concept is we spend up to 90% of our time thinking about unresolved issues. That order is not complete. So we literally, in that situation, we think about the things that are unresolved. And so the purpose of a disclosure, betrayed partners have questions, and when they're not resolved and when they keep going through their mind, it's hard for the betrayed partner to move on. In contrast, the betraying partner has their own secrets, and it's hard for them to connect on a deeper level. And so the Zeigarnik effect is a good explanation of why couples get stuck and can't move on without the disclosure process. So the foundation of healing really comes in that kind of transparency and openness. So the Zeigarnik effect, use it to your benefit by talking about the details so there are no more secrets. That's a foundational principle for healing after sexual betrayal. Now, the research shows it, and I just shared the research that supports why disclosures are important. I hope it's helpful for you to understand why it matters. Finally, some of the core things, it helps identify and break old patterns. It allows us to have continuous accountability because once you're honest, you can do it again, be honest. It helps you have meaningful support and connection because you're not doing it alone. It can actually improve your relationship skills because once you've had these kind of hard conversations, you know that you can have hard conversations again. And that's a critical part of how you're going to succeed. Now, so 3 steps to this process. The formal disclosure is what we've talked about. I introduced a little bit about the impact letter, which would be written by the betrayed partner. And then we would follow that up with an emotional restitution letter where we actually talk about the gaslighting, deception, lies, and manipulation. And I talk more about that process in my book, in Gaslighting No More. So you can learn more about that in my book, Gaslighting No More, that chapter where I talk about how to make amends. And that's a critical step to the healing process. And I share research on why that matters. And you can learn more about that in my book, Rebuilding Your Relationship After Sexual Betrayal. All right, so there are a couple things I do want to follow up here with. When is it good? Maybe we don't avoid a disclosure. The 4 things that I've specifically identified. While a partner's still acting out, it's much less effective. I've seen people try it, but when you're still actively in your acting out behaviors, it's not as effective because where do you begin and end? Well, I'm still doing that. Okay, so we want to, if there's some sobriety, it's more effective. If you're going to be going through a divorce, you're done with the relationship, it's not a great idea to do a disclosure because it's neither one of you really care about, or one of you doesn't care about the relationship anymore. And it really, that information, I've seen people try to do this and I've seen people do it because one person wanted to just be accountable. The person acting out just said, I'm willing to do this if you want it. The betrayed partner said yes. They were still going through the divorce. But that person said, I just want to be transparent. I want to be open because I feel like I can't heal if I don't. If one is life at risk, if one's feeling suicidal, obviously that's not a time to do a disclosure. We want to make sure that we're emotionally stable before we do that. And then if the PTSD symptoms are too elevated, you can't focus, the stress is so high, that's not a good time to do that. So you want to make sure that you have emotional support, that you're able to regulate difficult emotions, and that's something that we want to make sure that we do before we do a disclosure. Some additional resources for you as you go through this. I have my Rebuild Your Relationship After Sexual Betrayal book club. You can find that here at humanintimacy.com. Also, Dr. Stephanie Karn's book, A Courageous Love. If you want to walk through how couples do the disclosure process, this is a great resource for you. And then Full Disclosure, How to Share the Truth After Sexual Betrayal by Dan Drake and Janice Caudell. These are great resources for you if you want extra support after doing the disclosure. All right, that then concludes today's content. Again, if you haven't seen my book club, I encourage you to consider participating in it. I offer it a few times each year just to go through the book and provide support for couples. Anyway, thank you for taking time to go through this. I hope it's been helpful in understanding the power of and benefits of a disclosure. Thank you very much for your time.